week on Africa Weekly. We focus on Nigeria, where locally produced methamphetamines have become so popular that internal security is under threat as armed gangs vie for control of the market. And we follow the travelling digital cinema in Central African Republic, where a small group of volunteers is roaming the conflict-ridden country to broadcast educational films on sensitive social issues. But first, a summary of the stories that made the headlines this week. Families of the victims of Tuesday's terrorist attack in Nairobi grieved the loss of their loved ones as they put them to rest. At least 21 people were killed, including 16 Kenyans, 1 Briton and 1 American, after gunmen stormed a luxury hotel complex in the capital. On Wednesday, President Uhuru Kenyatta announced that the perpetrators had been eliminated. Hundreds of civilians were rescued after an almost 20-hour operation as the assault unfolded on Tuesday. At least one suicide bomber blew himself up, and others swapped gunfire with security forces at the complex, which includes a hotel, spa, restaurant and offices. CCTV footage broadcast on local media showed 4 black-clad, heavily armed men entering the complex. The attack was claimed by the Somali Al-Qaeda-linked group Al-Shabaab, which has targeted Kenya since it sent its army into Somalia in October 2011 to fight the jihadist group. Sudanese security forces fired tear gas at protesters marching on President Omar al-Bashir's palace on Thursday to demand his resignation. Multiple protests were called in a dozen Sudanese cities, with unrest growing since the government's announcement last month that it would be tripling the price of bread. The demonstrations have since escalated into broader protests against Bashir's 3-decade rule that have triggered clashes with security forces, which have left at least 26 people dead, according to officials, although human rights groups have put the death toll higher. A wave of protests erupted in Zimbabwe on Monday, following President Emmerson Mnangagwa's announcement of a fuel hike in a televised address on Saturday.
With effect from midnight tonight, a fuel pump price of $3.11 per litre for diesel and $3.31 per litre for petrol will come into effect.
Protesters burned a police station, barricaded roads and looted shops in Harare, Kadoma and Bulawayo cities. Meanwhile, security forces responded with rubber bullets and tear gas and allegedly used live ammunition. Mnangagwa has called for calm as he vows to tackle the monumental task of fixing the shattered economy. Zimbabwe's economy has been in ruins since hyperinflation wiped out savings between 2007 and 2009, when the Zimbabwean dollar was abandoned in favor of the US dollar. The International Criminal Court on Wednesday dashed Ivory Coast ex-president Laurent Gbagbo's hopes of a swift release following his acquittal on charges of crimes against humanity. Trial judges had earlier ordered Gbagbo and his right-hand man Charles Blé Goude to be immediately freed after clearing them of any role in a wave of post-electoral violence in 2010 to 2011 that killed 3,000 people. Celebrations erupted back in Abidjan, and Gbagbo's daughter said he planned an emotional homecoming to the Ivory Coast after 7 years in detention. But prosecutors filed a last-ditch challenge late Wednesday to keep the pair behind bars, while the ICC looks at an overall appeal against Tuesday's decision to acquit them. The Democratic Republic of Congo's Constitutional Court began examining an appeal on Tuesday against presidential election results that gave victory to opposition leader Félix Tshisekedi. The appeal was lodged by Tshisekedi's primary rival in the race, Martin Fayulu, who came second in the official results. The official results released gave Tshisekedi 38.6% of the December 30 vote, against Fayulu's 34.8%. Fayulu, however, claims that he won 61% of the ballots. Gabon's President Ali Bongo was back in Libreville on Tuesday, presiding over a ceremony where ministers from the new government were sworn in. Bongo had been abroad for months recovering, during which time the oil-rich state had been without an effective government. In his absence, a small group of renegade soldiers briefly tried to stage a coup before it was quashed by security forces, who arrested the leader and killed 2 others. Madagascar's Andry Rajoelina took oath on Friday, completing the transfer of power between him and the outgoing president at the country's presidential palace. The Constitutional Court confirmed Rajoelina as the winner of the country's presidential election after his opponent Marc Ravalomanana lodged a complaint alleging fraud.
This is one of the largest seizures of methamphetamine ever made in Nigeria. In mid-November, the anti-drug agency discovered this secret laboratory hidden in the jungle near the southeast city of Owerri. Inside the lab, investigators found drugs worth over $1 million.
On the 9th of November, a team from our headquarters came here and they discovered the lab just behind us. A lab or the cover where they produce this meth, and we all know meth is a very dangerous drug.
Drug enforcement officials arrested dozens of people, including the kingpin, a man in his 30s who amassed a considerable fortune thanks to the drug trade. Drug trafficking is not new to Nigeria. The country has long been a transit point for cocaine and heroin going to Europe and North America. But around 10 years ago, methamphetamines began to be actually produced in the country, meaning Nigerians now control the whole supply chain.
Assuming there are 10 or 15 meth labs all over the country, then you can be talking about over a ton per week being produced in Nigeria, and it's being shipped out of the country.
1 kilogram of meth sells for up to $150,000 in Asia, and Nigerian cartels are waging a merciless war for control over the market. Last year, heavily armed men burst into a church in the southeast village of Ozubulu during Sunday Mass and shot into the crowd. 13 members of the congregation were killed, the victims mostly women and children.
A volcanic eruption. It was just shootings from randomly and recklessly inside the church. Before I know what was happening, a lot of people have been shot.
The traumatized residents fear that such violence could happen again. With porous borders and widespread corruption, Nigeria risks becoming the world's next narco state.
For several months, this old car has been travelling along the rough roads of the Central African Republic. But this is not any old vehicle. It's a mobile cinema that roams the country showing films to audiences that have often never seen a screen before.
The travelling digital cinema broadcasts thematic films, films which aim to sensitise the population to issues it is faced with.
The issues the films cover are numerous and include vaccination, forced marriage, and girls' education. For many Central Africans living in remote regions, cinema allows them to grasp societal problems which are systematically discussed following the screening.
The film I saw yesterday on the big screen was extremely interesting. What I remembered is the importance that must be attributed to girls' schooling, rather than to making them work.
Although financed by UNICEF, the French Alliance of Bangui, and funds from other mobile cinemas in Africa, the project is struggling to survive. The organisers and technicians, all volunteers, have to make do with old equipment.
We've made a crate to put the equipment inside so as to protect it from the road, because the state of the roads isn't good.
Despite difficulties, the mobile cinema wants to continue on its way, getting closer to zones heavily affected by years of deadly conflict, with the hope of triggering dreams, emotions, perhaps even vocations.
Mauritanians celebrated the 10th Nomad Festival in Nouakchott on Thursday, bringing together nomadic people from Canada and Mauritania. The opening ceremony was marked by a horse race and camel parade, as well as a concert by Mauritanian and Canadian artists. A Espérance de Tunis supporters celebrated their football team's centenary in front of their headquarters in the Tunisian capital's popular Bab Souika district, a few days after the team was crowned champions of Africa. That's all from us at Africa Weekly. Until next week.